Greetings, it is I, Tantus Dracovin, your Lord Emperor here at the Dracovin Empire, and welcome once more. Are you ready to dive back into the Pathfinder world of Golarion? Yes, I've got another ancestry talk to review about today, and it's a very interesting one because it's also a monster. And what I mean is, really as a monster. We're talking skeletons today, because you can play a skeleton. Interesting. I can play a skeleton? Why, yes, you can, and you can play them in 2nd edition. Even more interesting. We're going to dive deep into it, but before we do, let's give our normal shout-outs. Remember to join me, of course, live if you can over on Twitch, or if you can, join me on YouTube whenever you are. Check out everything. Please give all the basic supports of, liking, subscribing, ringing the bell, do all those things that help the algorithm of YouTube. Any way you can support me on any of the places I am, it'd be great. It helps me keep me going in this. I do this mostly out of the love of my heart for talking about these things, and I would love, just more support, and help along the way. Even if it's just ringing a bell, leaving a like. Skeleton. Where do we start with this? Well, it's one of those things as I do like to talk books, but it's an interesting one because there's really 2 types of sources that you can have, and I'm going to point these 2 types of sources out, because you really do have to know about them. And the first one, of course, is, well, bestiaries, monster manuals, places that have creatures you'd fight, and this is your average skeleton. And that's the interesting thing about talking about this ancestry. I'm going to break down both versions of it, because the one version turns into the one you can play, but you're still that original one. And then, of course, from 2nd edition, the book that really helped with this is the Book of the Dead. This gave us the stats for playing a skeleton. And I'm not talking about Skeletal Champion, too. I'm talking about a just normal skeleton. I think that's the other unique thing that we are talking about here. Skeletal Champion is a unique type of skeleton that, regardless of creation, retains its intelligence. We're talking pure, unadulterated, you're just a normal skeleton created with an animate dead spell, somehow, you got smarts. That's what we're going on. That's what we're going to be kind of diving into. Let's start with your just monster skeleton, though, because we do have to know about the monster. Traditionally, it's a mindless undead, it's very simple, it's created from the bones of some kind of skeletal creature, it's just something. You just be like, cast your spell, a bunch of bones come together, there's no connection to life, there's no soul in that thing. It's just some necromantic energy. It's just like the zombies out of a corpse. The skeleton, the zombies. These are the undead that people tend to tolerate most, just because they're not really defiling the souls of the dead, they're defiling the bodies of the dead. So it's traditionally slightly more tolerant. But still, it's necromancy. And what are they? They're skeletons. Now, a traditional skeleton doesn't need to just be a humanoid. Yes, when we're talking about these versions of skeletons you play, they will be most likely humanoids, of course, or, having some kind of intelligence in mind, but again, whatever type of creature was animated as a skeleton is that. If it had horns, wings, tails, they're present, just skeletal versions of them. And again, most are just mindless. Though, again, they will usually have enough of their kind of lost intelligence to wield armor and weapons that was connected to them. And then we have the rare few half-sentients. They do exist. If you're going to look for a skeleton, though, they are common in skeleton type of undead. You might find them in old dungeons, graveyards, battlefields. Skeleton horses will serve as mounts for other undead. Reanimated giants would be more powerful than those of animated smaller beings. And despite lack of muscles, they move around. They're just bones doing that, animated by necromantic negative energies. That give them this kind of idea of false life. That is a skeleton. And again, depending on what would be animated, makes a difference. If I'm animating a dragon or giant or other great beast, it's still a pile of bones, but it's much more deadly, much more dangerous than just some dude. So, when do they get their minds back? Well, it's one of those strange things, is that a skeleton that becomes an adventurer, a skeleton that becomes a person, happens. Is it the willpower of the being that's being raised back, that there's some kind of connection to its body? It's really hard to say. Or maybe it's some kind of unusual circumstance. And again, I'm saying that, this extraordinary circumstance, this force of will, this ego, their ideals, whatever it is, it's still traumatic to raise things as a skeleton. It's not a skeletal champion. Skeletal champion's supposed to retain mind. This is a being that's supposed to be mindless. So, when these beings come back, and they do sometimes, rarely, because of whatever circumstance, it's a fractured, hazy thing, some don't remember anything at all. Like, I know I was a being, but I can't remember a lot. Others are just like, it's hazy, fractured, it's traumatic. And there will be some that regain those memories. Others, they may have lost those connections to what they were forever. And it also comes down to how this being also views itself, now that's alive again. Am I Jim, come back from the dead? Or I'm something new, something different, that only has this echo of Jim? Remember, something like Speak with the Dead, it's not a direct speaking of the dead. It's an echo of the dead, an imprint of the dead. Maybe that's what these just are. Maybe that's what you believe in yourself. You could believe that you are a fraction of that thing's soul come back in this body because of the magic, and somehow seeing an opportunity to become. Or you could see yourself as maybe just a copy, an echo. You're something new that just so happens to be connected to it. Both are fundamentally interesting ideas for a direction to look at themselves. But they are also fundamentally very different. And it means a lot for what you are as a skeletal adventurer. Now, it is important to note that morally, they do tend to go towards where you were in life. But you still have to deal with the fact that you are animated and affected by negative energy. And so, at very least, neutrality, sometimes even evil, can be drawn out about them. And so fighting against that call of negative energy, that corruption of it, is something that a skeleton will have to do throughout their existence. Some will fall to it, some will manage to hold against it. As for how they appear, well, most want to set themselves apart. They understand that they are not your average undead. They're not that skeletal champion. They're just a normal skeleton. They don't have any special abilities. They don't have any, boosted stats. They're just a dude. Or a dudette, They're just a thing. A being. Something that is now animated. I guess that's the best way of saying it. Something that's now animated. So, a lot of them, just like this dude here, flamboyant, large feathered caps, ornate armor, embroidered skills, jewelry. Some of them will even get kind of, tattoo-like decorations on their bones, or decorate their skull in paints. So they want to have this fashion, glittering jewelry in their warlord, those intricate carvings that they want to signal to living people they're not like other undead. That's what they want to do. They want to be like, hey, I'm not your average whatever. See me differently. See me as something. And again, regardless of what you think, if you're a continuation of life or something entirely new, you still have to grasp the fact that you are undead. You are a new being. You're something different. You're just bones. And that's a tough thing to grasp with sometimes. Now, lacking bones does mean it does make it difficult to heal, but they will mend themselves by collecting bones. That's something that was mentioned in the Book of the Dead. As for places on Golarion, well, intelligent scoutruns, you don't really find them in large areas, so none of them really can build a settlement. It's one of those things that, certainly speaking, in places with a lot more skeletons and undead, like Geb, you can find more of them. But again, that rarity that a singular normal skeleton has intelligence is quite rare. You know, So, typically, if you do find multiple intelligent skeletons, place like Geb, they'll probably just mingle with other undead that are intelligent. Kind of band together with them. They're like, hey, you guys, you know what's going on with me. You kind of understand. We're all intelligent undead here. I'm kind of unusual and different. Can I hang out with you guys and kind of get the lay of the land? And again, there are also those that would keep company with those that remind them of their former lives. But also, such reminders can easily lead to revulsion, driven by the negative energy within them. So it's sort of like some of them cling to their former lives, some of them reject their former lives. It's just so different. And Gebite skeletons that are like this are basically usually substituted as servants. They're not mindless, they're not just created basically beings to serve you, in a way, but instead you're just a servant. And, unfortunately being a lesser undead in the eyes of many other dead of Geb, you're kind of low there. Outside of Geb, well, you're probably more solitary, on your own. You're going to be on the outskirts of society where you can hide, or maybe disguise yourself, because you are very likely going to a place that's very hard to find acceptance amongst the living. There are places that they might not be feared, like Niddle or Secamenia, but finding respect, finding yourself a place in society, it's still difficult. You still are seen negatively. And yeah, we have to talk about their connections and their beliefs. We've kind of talked about how negative energy is always going to have an influence on it. And if you're intelligent, you're going to try to maybe go for your own alignment, the alignment of your creator. Those are two directions you start out. And then, that driven towards things like the neutral/evil, tends to be a hard thing. So, if you can stave off the darkest corruptions, you're probably still going to kind of settle down on a pretty neutral attitude. Because, you're undead, though. Plenty of them worship gods of death, or Gotha. That's a big one. Hi, I'm undead. A god of death, like Orgotha, kind of would accept me. Others might seek redemption, and look towards gods of life and redemption. There are deities that are accepting and don't have anti-undead dogma, like Shelyn, who tends to be popular if you wish to gain a divine influence against your destructive influences, and maybe even seek a greater purpose for just your creation, for your existence. So it's an interesting idea that there are those that go deeply into, especially those that have beliefs, religious, of the gods of Golarion, or Gotha, or Shelyn. Yeah, and it's just unfortunate that there's a lot of the more redemption, good-aligned deities that would not accept the skeleton. Now there are a number of variations of skeletons, and they come from the basic variations plus the ancestry variations. And I'm going to go over both of those variants. This is the burning skeleton. It is one of the variants of your typical skeletons. They're on fire, and they explode to a fireball upon death. Bloody skeletons, bones drip with blood and gore that grants them unholy healing. Compact ones are from smaller ancestries like halflings or gnomes and can fit into tight spaces. Fodder ones are simple but effective skeletons animated from humans. Monstrous ones are from beasts or monstrous humanoids. Of course, the skeletal champions automatically retain their intellect. That's an entirely different thing because you don't normally play them as a character. That's a monster we're talking about, definitely then. And sturdy ones are usually built from more physically sturdy races like dwarves and orcs that are more suited for physical hazards. In the same way, some of those are more playable in information. Other than those there, Shifting Skeleton was introduced as a skeleton with a shape-changing creature from one of the further books in the future. The Wake of the Dead series. Comics. And it had information you could use. Turns out sometimes they do that. So yeah. That's the variations on skeleton. And that's what we have to talk about today. This is another one that was very interesting because I looked at it, and it's an interesting type of character to play. And certainly it is a little bit of legacy content at this point in time. We haven't seen much update on the playing it since the core and revised stuff came out in Pathfinder. But it's another one of those things that I feel like most of it's probably fine. Legacy content, probably fine. We're probably not going to worry too much about it overall. They're pretty simple, and yeah, probably not a lot of major rewrites, if any. They are just intelligent skeletons. And the fact is that, yeah, you can't get away from the fact that they are not more powerful undead. They're not skeletal champions or other types of more skeleton-like undead. They're just your normal skeleton. Pathfinder 1st Edition, you just belt out like an animate dead and create a bunch of skeletons. You know, something that's very weak. And then something happens to one of them, or in the creation of one of them, it's smart. It just has a mind. Just something. That will, that miracle, that I don't know what. A strange twist of necromancy creates something. Is it the original being? Is it an echo of the being? And there's so many questions that can't be answered, and I don't think even they can answer it. And it comes down to the individual that's in this state to believe it. Now that they are in the state, they are intelligent, they are a being on their own, and they are, well, even if they don't really remember their memories, they understand what they are. It's like, man, I can't really remember what I was. It's these echoes, these things I just don't remember, but I am, wow, I'm back and I'm this thing now. And certainly speaking, the less you remember, the more I'm your own being, I'm going to go my own direction. But it's just such an interesting opportunity for story, for character, for being. That's what these are. For something very different, from something very unusual, something very monstrous in a way. But still, honestly speaking, could be very, in pejorative term, human. Very real. Very alive. That's why gaudy fashion, the bone tattoos, the carving, the art, all those things that stand out, that scream, I'm alive. I am me. I am unique. I am not some mindless monster. Be dismissed. Welcome. That's what makes skeletons interesting. As a playable character. But I'll leave that here for this part of the video. Remember, you can always check me out live on Twitch. I'll be hanging out with them a little bit later on. Some more. Probably do one more video. Cough, cough. You can always check out those Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. Thursdays, Pathfinder. There's a social media link below, and man, I'm forgetting my outro. Look up a outro of my old video. Please, come on, just give some support. Anyway, yes. Crimson Queen, Wednesdays at 9. Discuss tabletop Saturdays at 6. There we go. Skeletons are pretty cool. Again, I'll say it before we finish up here. Maxwell. Player character. It was 5e, mind you, but a player character from my Children of Wrath game. He was only in the first part of it before things went really downhill, cough, cough, but his character screams this so much. Screams the idea of the flamboyant garb, the showing off that, like, I'm me, I'm still alive, I'm still something beyond just a pile of bones. It's so interesting to see that as a character, he was so connected to what this lore is. This was years ago at this point in time. And he was a new player. So he really wasn't really like looking up and thinking about this kind of stuff. But it's just so interesting that's an interesting connection between. I really love that, and I could recommend you. Pretty much, you can go look at that series. There's some good things and bad things about that series overall, but I'm sure it's still pretty fun. All right, everybody, I'm going to get running and go hang out with some Twitch support. Maybe we'll do another video. Maybe we'll go hang out. And if you're joining me for that, great. If not, to those of you on YouTube, I bid you a deep and wonderful farewell.